Welcome back, team. Today we're talking about how to re-engage silent customers without being pushy. As a salesperson, it can be hugely frustrating when we have a customer that stops responding to us. And this might be after their initial inquiry, or we've sent a quote or a proposal, maybe even a cold outreach. I'm all about taking a customer-centric sales approach, so in this episode, I'm going to discuss how you can engage with your potential customer in a way that addresses their needs without hard or pushy selling tactics. We'll also look at some common scenarios of where customers go silent. We're going to try and identify what are some of the potential issues in the background, and then I'm going to share with you some actionable tips. So some of the things that you can do to try and encourage a response while still taking that customer-first approach. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Art of Selling podcast. If you're looking to boost your team's performance or craft a winning sales strategy, you're in the right place. My name is Varun Dhani, and I'm here to provide you with the tools, techniques, and guidance you need to succeed. Join me as we dive deep into the action-based behaviors, all aimed at driving your business forward. Alright, so here are some of the common scenarios that I've faced where a customer's gone silent. They ask me about a product or service, and when I ask them qualifying questions, they don't come back to me. I have a customer who I've sent a quote to or a proposal, and they won't come back to me with any sort of feedback. I'm trying to set a meeting with a client, and they won't acknowledge my request. Or when I'm trying to do some targeted business development and I have to do cold outreach, I'm not getting the response that I'm looking for. With this last one, I want to be clear that I'm talking about targeted business development approaches. So this isn't the call center type cold calling. Now, before we start jumping into a solution, let's first try and understand why our customers might go quiet. We want to understand this so that we can apply some empathy when it comes to our selling techniques. This is what's going to help us navigate away from becoming that pushy salesperson. It's worth considering that silence from a customer is not rejection. It may be that they just are not ready for your product or service yet. So our prospect or customer can have many things going on in the background, which might cause them not to come back to us. So reason number one for them not to be able to come back to us might be an overload of information and unclear messaging. So customers can feel overwhelmed by too much information. And with too much information, our message doesn't necessarily clearly explain the value of our product and services. Now, this might even be the case when they've inquired about your product and service and you are asking them too many qualifying questions. Now, because of this, it may be that with the number of questions that you've asked them, it's causing them to now consider a whole lot more than what they were initially prepared for, which of course means more time from their perspective, more effort, and all of this causes overwhelm. Now, the second reason that we might not get a response is our customer's perception of urgency or relevance just isn't high enough. So what I mean by this is that our customer may not see urgency in moving forward with what you've proposed because they don't yet clearly understand either how that product solves their problem or even if their problem is big enough for it to need solving. Now, really what I mean here is that they have low amounts of motivation to take action. If our client or our prospect doesn't see a big enough gain or experience big enough pain with whatever is happening in their business, their motivation levels to fix that issue is very low. This actually tends to impact us as well. I want you to think about when you make your to-do list. There will be certain things, right, specific action items that you might not get to, in which case you just push it forward to the next day. Sometimes you'll have items that'll get pushed to the next day and the next day and the next day. That's because there either isn't a big enough gain or a big enough pain for you to jump onto that action item, so you just ignore it. This is exactly what is happening with our customer. Now, the other factor that tends to have an impact is relevance. So here, the challenge our customer is facing is they are struggling to connect whatever we've put forward as our offer with our product or service to their needs. Now, this happens when our messaging isn't very clear. So in proposals, we're really clear on what we do, but it doesn't communicate to our clients how it's going to help them solve their problem, in which case, as far as they're concerned, it's not relevant, so why would they come back to us? So reason number 3 that we don't get a response might be with timing as well as competing priorities. So our customer might be dealing with other pressing matters, and it's going to take attention away from your offer, your email, your approach. In sales, sometimes we can fall into this trap of believing that our product or service is the most important for the customer to continue operating their business. Now, I get it. No doubt what you have to offer is really important. But as we've discussed before, they might have other issues or priorities that are equal or higher in terms of pain or gain that is at the top of their list. Now, we all don't work on one thing at a time, and so our customers are exactly the same. They never work on one thing at a time. I tend to juggle many things at once, and each one of those things, depending on any given day, will be higher in terms of priority. So this is what might be impacting our customer from prioritizing our approaches, our product, or our services. Reason number 4 for that silent customer is a lack of trust or comfort. Now, this is a big factor with new clients, when we do cold outreach, and with very first engagements. Trust is something that takes time to build. When it's built well, we form a relationship with our customer. Now, excellent salespeople know that relationship selling is the most valuable way to be successful. In fact, it's why companies put non-compete and non-solicit clauses into employment contracts for sales staff. Relationship-based selling is why clients will follow excellent salespeople to new companies. So, in new engagements or one-off prospects, our clients don't know us, they don't like us, very likely they don't trust us. In fact, because of the experience with other greasy, pushy, product-focused salespeople, they might actually put us in the same bucket, which means they don't feel compelled to respond to us in a timely manner. Reason number 5 is that our client is playing man in the middle. So sometimes the person that we're communicating with isn't the final or the only decision maker. In fact, they might be gathering information on behalf of someone else or a team. This adds another layer of complication because they have to first interpret the original request from whoever made it and then send it to you. Then, after you've provided them a response, our contact needs to understand what is it that you're trying to say and then relay this back to the original person or team. Of course, all this can cause delays, not only delays in understanding, but delays in responses because they are waiting for feedback. Also, the urgency to respond here may be a whole lot lower since whatever this request is may not necessarily have an overall impact on our contact themselves personally, as in there is no material gain or large enough pain for them to solve because they are doing this on someone else's behalf. And so we come to our last reason. Reason number 6 is a fear of commitment or decision fatigue. So sometimes a customer might be avoiding an engagement because of everything that we've just covered. They are completely overloaded with information. Yet, for them, it isn't the highest priority. They're also, or they might be, playing man in the middle, which means their trust levels and comfort with your offer isn't yet compelling enough. All of this combined means they're worried about making the wrong decision. So, with all this overwhelm, with all of this risk in the moment, it may feel better for them to do nothing versus come back to you and make a mistake. So these are some of the background things that could be the cause of why your customer is not coming back to you as you would have hoped. You can see there are many factors at play at their end, and there could be even more that I'm not covering right now. What you'll also realize when you listen to the first part of the episode is that the lead is not dead. It needs a bit more persistence from us as salespeople to follow up. A quick Google or Plex will show you that it takes between 5 to 12 contact attempts to convert a lead to a sale. Now, these attempts can be light touches of value. They don't need to be hard engagement calls or emails. Salespeople can often interpret silence as rejection, and worse off, they can flag the opportunity as lost. It's something that we want to avoid jumping to. Let's look at what are some of the things that you can do to get a response. The key to re-engaging silent customers is focusing on their needs, not on closing the sale. If I have a client that has gone silent, my goals have now changed. I'm focused on re-establishing communication lines versus trying to focus on leading them to my offer, product, or service. Remember, we're customer-centric salespeople, not those hard-closing, pushy product vloggers. If a client has gone quiet, maybe they just need some time. Next, we're going to talk about some strategies to help you reignite conversations with potential customers. Team, I've created for you a cheat sheet of 4 example messages that you can utilize with your customers when you're trying to re-engage them. As you listen to the rest of the episode, feel free to use the link in the show notes, download a copy of those examples, and make use of them. Feel free to edit them and adjust them appropriately for your customer type and your industry. So strategy number 1 is to follow up with value, not pressure. Instead of sending a generic follow-up, asking them if they've made a decision, use this interaction opportunity to provide something of value. This could be some sort of an additional resource or a relevant article or case study specifically aligning to the challenges that customer might be facing or trying to solve depending on their business type. If you've made some sort of a cold outreach, I'm going to assume that you already did a lot of research on them, which means you'll know exactly what are some of the challenges that business type might be facing or looking to solve. If you're the expert in your industry or field, you'll already know what similar types of clients are asking for or the challenges they are facing. And so utilize this information to be able to promote a response. What this is going to do is it's going to show your customers that you are thinking about their needs and not just a sale. I like to use different methods of communication when I do my follow-ups. And what this does is this keeps me away from overusing one method and coming across like a pest. In selling, there is a fine line between persistence and being a pest. And for salespeople, we want to stay on the right side of that line. Of course, I leverage email and phone, but where possible, I'll use SMS, instant messaging platforms, and also DMs if I'm connected to my client through social channels. When I use this approach in my follow-ups, this helps maintain the focus on how I can help my customer by adding value. It reinforces trust and also positions me as a partner in trying to solve their problems. Strategy number 2 is to reframe the conversation around your client's needs. If a customer has gone silent after an initial discussion, it may be because they're unsure how your product or service fits into their current needs. Let's firstly be clear that customers don't need our product and services. Instead, they're looking for some sort of an outcome, and our product or service should clearly show them how it will help them achieve this outcome. For example, no one needs sales training, which is my service. What most companies do want, though, is more customers, more revenue, more margin, and sales training can help enable that. So when you're reframing your conversation, send a message that shows you are genuinely interested in addressing your client's challenges rather than simply pushing your solutions. This type of follow-up shifts the focus away from the sale and towards the customer's experience, which can then prompt them to re-engage. Strategy number 3 is to try and create some interest with a time-sensitive offer without being pushy. So here you want to identify some sort of an upcoming event, webinar, or training session that is time-sensitive or maybe limited in terms of availability. This can help create a little bit of urgency and interest. The key thing here, though, is to frame it as an opportunity that the client should take advantage of rather than a pressure point. This lets the customer know that you're thinking about them and their business, and that there might be a window of opportunity to leverage some value without necessarily making them feel rushed about the initial product or service. Now, sometimes I get asked if in a time-sensitive offer, you can provide some sort of a discount or a promotion. Now, personally, I like to avoid things like that in initial discussions because it can risk devaluing your offer. But if in your industry those things tend to work, then feel free to utilize them. And so our final and fourth strategy is to ask for feedback or permission to pause. If you've tried the other strategies and your client is still not responding, then this is the one to utilize last. Sometimes the most customer-friendly approach is to ask your customer if they are still interested, or if it's better to reconnect with them at a later stage. What this does is it shows respect for their time, and it can sometimes prompt a response from them because it lowers the pressure on them. Now the conversation isn't about moving forward with a product or service. The intention here, though, isn't to give up too early and use this too early in your sales process. You also don't want to utilize this in a passive-aggressive way. So I tend to utilize this strategy after I've followed up with a client 3 times. And of course, in each one of those follow-ups, I'll use a different communication method. I'm also going to leave enough time in between each of those interactions. And if I still don't get a response, then this is my final approach. Now, when it comes time to think about what should be the appropriate time frame between interactions. So for me personally, I like to use anywhere between 5 working days or 2 weeks, depending on my gut feel of the opportunity type, size, and also the complexity of what's being discussed. So then I will send this as my final message, acknowledging with the client that I'm not looking to be a pest. I asked them to see if they could give me some guidance, if there was some sort of misalignment either with my company or with my offer, which is why they are not coming back to me. I'll also say to them that I will check in on them and the opportunity in the next 6 months, which signposts for them that I will follow up well into the future. By giving the customer an easy way out, not only do you show respect for their time, but also their circumstance, which can sometimes encourage a response. They're either going to say they want to pause the conversation, they do want to move forward, but maybe at a later stage, or you might get some valuable learning feedback, which you can incorporate into your next approach. So team, those are the 4 strategies that I tend to utilize in my selling journey. Feel free to download that examples cheat sheet because it will show you how some of those messages are constructed. Now what I'm going to talk about is what are some of the things that you should avoid doing. Now, while follow-up is an important part of your sales process, there are some things we want to absolutely avoid so that we don't end up pushing the customer even further away and breaking trust. So number 1 thing to avoid is being overly pushy. So if you are constantly sending messages like just checking in or are there any updates, can really feel invasive and desperate. Customers don't want to feel hounded, and these are the type of messages that don't add any value. If anything, it breaks trust and you want to try and avoid it. Number 2, avoid guilt-tripping your customer. If your customer hasn't responded, avoid messages that might make them feel bad for not replying. This is an example of such a message. Hi, Mr. Customer. I've followed up several times now without a response. If you find yourself sending a message like this tactic can damage trust and make the customer less likely to engage in future, even when a real need surfaces. The next thing to avoid is lengthy and complex messages. So when you do follow up, try and keep them short, direct, and easy for a client to digest. Long emails or overly detailed messages can overwhelm the customer and actually deter them from responding. Focus on one key point at a time in your follow-ups, and these could be a question, a resource, or an offer. Avoid sending more general information about your product and services. If they haven't come back to you with information already, sending them more information about your product and service isn't actually going to help. This is the same as spam, and spam generally gets ignored. So the last thing to think about in terms of avoidance is avoid ignoring your customer's silence. What I mean by this is that if your customer hasn't responded, don't just keep sending them messages as if nothing is wrong. You actually want to address their silence respectfully and invite them to share any of their hesitations or feedbacks with you. There is a real reason in the background which is causing their silence. Some of these reasons could be confidential. And so when I do follow up, I don't expect my customer to tell me everything. In fact, I will acknowledge this early on and give them space in case there are bits of information they can't share with me. This is where we as salespeople can really apply empathy and real understanding, which is the differentiator between us and those pushy, greasy salespeople. This approach can help open the door for a constructive dialogue with your customer, and it might help you move the conversation forward. So team, we've spoken about what are some of those scenarios when your customer might go silent and some of the background issues or things that might be happening for our client that causes those silence. I've shared with you what are some of the strategies that you can apply, and if you utilize the examples in the cheat sheet, it might help you reignite some conversations with your clients if you're facing the same issue. I've also spoken about what are some of the things to avoid doing so that we don't come across like pushy product floggers. So remember, in sales, a customer's silence doesn't necessarily mean that they've lost interest. It's important to approach these situations with a little bit of patience, empathy, and a focus on trying to provide value. By understanding why customers might go quiet and using thoughtful, customer-centric strategies to re-engage them, you can build trust and create meaningful, long-term relationships without resorting to hard selling tactics. Team, I hope you've enjoyed this episode and that you get value out of the example templates. Until the next episode, sell well.